MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener special and use my promo code USA.
A police chief is killed in a hotel and one of his officers is charged with murder. USA Radio Network's Chris Barnes has more on the story.
Investigators in Florida say an Oklahoma police chief is dead after he got into a fight with one of his own officers. Authorities say Manford, Oklahoma Police Chief Larry Miller was found dead in a Pensacola Beach hotel a couple of days ago, and Officer Michael Neely is charged with murder and being held without bond. The two were in Florida for a conference, but no other details about the incident have been released.
Hong Kong protesters are bringing the central part of the city to a standstill over a shooting of a demonstrator yesterday. Roads have been blocked and gasoline bombs are being thrown onto subway tracks. Police are responding by firing tear gas into the crowds of protesters. The protests all stem back to an anti-government protester being shot by a police officer. And you're listening to USA Radio News.
It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show, final 30 here on the program as we make our way to 6 o'clock Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Pacific, where our next guest comes to us. A victorious Seattle in so many ways for our next guest. He is, of course, a great journalist. He is a great musician. He is a amazing Renaissance man, and he's a contributor here every Tuesday on the Jeff Santos Show in our final segment. He is MTC. You can follow him on Twitter and Facebook at Daily Kos. And he's Mark Taylor-Canfield. MTC, how you doing, my friend?
Sorry, I had myself muted there because I'm at the Seattle Sounders championship celebration for the Major League Soccer Cup, which they won.
There you go. But congratulations. Boy, what it's been a week of celebrations. First, of course, your Sounders, and then the Seahawks last night, and more importantly, Miss Sawant coming back. You know, we talked on, I think it was Wednesday of last week, and I was very disappointed that she couldn't pull out the victory. And then a couple of days later, I get this text from you saying she's doing well, and then boom, she won. That's a great a Seattle sweep over there. You know, the two issues that are not as important as the city councilor winning, but a very exciting time to be a citizen of Seattle, Mark.
Yeah, there's so much going on. I mean, right now there are thousands of people gathered right next to the Space Needle celebrating with the Seattle Sounders soccer team. And, you know, this is the team that's owned partly, one of the partners is Drew Carey, the comedian. But you know what? They brought out almost 65,000 people for the MLS Cup, which is the largest audience ever in that stadium in the history of Seattle. Also, they're talking today, Jeff, not just about this second MLS championship, because they also got this in 2016, but they're also saying they are going to take on the Champions League, and they are going to go to the World Cup. They're psyched. And they do have some world-class players who actually aren't in Seattle today because they headed back to be with their national teams. But yeah, it's been a crazy time. You know, people are really excited about the Seattle Sounders. Macklemore started the party on Sunday with a big free concert down in Pioneer Square in the middle of downtown Seattle, and that got the ball rolling. Then they marched to the stadium. Today there was another big march from downtown, from Westlake Center, chanting all the way with the banners and the whole thing, you know, all the way to Seattle Center where the Space Needle's at, where they're still holding a rally right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if Macklemore's hanging out in the crowd right now. Might jump up on stage. I don't know. Yes. But the mayor was there, Mayor Jenny Durkin, King County Executive Dow Constantine was there. And so soccer, okay, this is what they're saying, Jeff. They're saying, this is what the mayor said. She said, Seattle is the soccer city of North America. We are it. This is where it's most popular. It's where the fans are the best, the team is the best, and we are going to show the rest of the country and the rest of North America how to make it on the World Soccer League scene. So there you go. It comes right from the horse's mouth, so to speak, the people who run the team and the mayor who actually gave them some city money to help renovate a stadium and stuff. So this is all good news for Seattle. And then Russell Wilson pulling off the big win last night. That was consummate. You know, Russell Wilson, one of the smartest quarterbacks in the history of NFL, I think, and did a great job last night showing the 49ers, which is the big rival, by the way. Believe me.
Right, of course.
People, you know,
Pete Carroll,
I mean, everybody.
Your coach is from the Bay Area. He grew up in Marin County. Actually, Pete Carroll.
Oh my God!
I don't know if
one of
you're
our
aware
best
of
players,
this.
Mr. Sherman, ended up in San Fran, so people are not happy about that. I know my cousin is really pissed off at the Seahawks because Mr. Sherman, who actually kind of was a very outspoken guy, along with Marshall Lynch and, you know, some of the other players were very kind of, you know, iconoclastic players. They were like the Seattle bad boys or whatever, but in a good way too. They were just trying to kind of like, you know, call out the league on some of his corporatism and be a little outrageous, which is very Seattle style. It's very Seattle style. I heard this today, you know, to have Macklemore leading the march yesterday to the soccer stadium. And then we also had a big rally for our socialist city council member, Shama Sawant, early this morning at City Hall, because she is pushing her people's budget, because it's the budget time now. The Seattle City Council has to come up with new budget priorities for the next year. So she's pushing, you know, of course, more money for affordable housing, rent control, all sorts of issues that, of course, support the poor and the working class, which is probably one of the reasons why she came from behind, from 8 points behind, 8% behind, to win this election in a big come from behind. If this, you know, it was really exciting and dramatic, much like her first win, where, you know, the night of the election, she was behind, and then, you know, within 24 hours, you know, the other incumbent council member, which was Richard Conlon, was giving his concession speech. So it's been a crazy time in Seattle. I can't keep up with it, Jeff. I mean, you fall asleep for, you know, a half hour and you miss something. That's the way things are right now.
We're talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield, who's live at the parade or the celebration of the soccer team in Seattle, the Seattle Sounders, here on the Jeff Santos Show. You know what, Mark, I was trying to tell you that Pete Carroll and I have had an on-air relationship, if you might, when in between his time as the head coach of the Patriots and before he went to USC, I had a chance to interview him. Matter of fact, on the eve of the 2000 election between Gore and Bush, Pete Carroll came out and was an avid supporter of Al Gore, who actually won the popular vote, and always liked him since then. And he's been a progressive guy, done a lot with the USC students down in Southern California. And of course, is, you know, in one of the most progressive cities in the country, in Seattle. So, you know, congrats on Pete, you know, running up and down those sidelines. He's the one of the oldest coaches, but he's in best shape of a lot of the coaches, too.
Oh, my gosh. I hope that I'm in that kind of shape when I'm his age. He's sort of my hero in that way. Like my grandfather, he's like one of those people who age just doesn't show very much. He's like a kid when he's out on the field, you know, and that's my grandfather, same way, like 70-year-old kid, 80-year-old kid. So, yeah, I think it's great. You know, I think, you know, he has a good relationship with the community. He's a very positive kind of guy, and he's got that kind of Southern California USC kind of glow, where, you know, with the sunglasses and the tan and the, you know, laid back kind of attitude, which goes over well with people. You know, he gets along with people really well. So yeah, he's a good guy. That I have to say this though. I actually have a piece that's been hanging in the Seattle Art Museum. It's kind of mind-blowing, but there's an artist project there through the Education Center, and her name is Gina Ciliano, is the artist, and she wrote this graphic novel called I Know What I Am, The Life and Times of Artemiso Gentilici, and it's a very interesting graphic novel that she did, very artistically done, but so she invited some people to participate in her project, and my piece actually was hanging in the Seattle Art Museum right next to their, you know, Renaissance masters or whatever. It was kind of funny. And you know, that's the kind of things, too, that have been happening in Seattle, too. The art scene is really vibrant here, in the music scene. So there are a lot of really great things going on. The art walk that night, the Seattle Art Museum, they opened to the public for free, and there was a lot of great exhibits there. So, yeah, I'm really proud of my city right now. I mean, the fact that Amazon did not win the Seattle City Council election is what was weighing heavy. Actually, that was weighing heavy on everyone's mind. So that was a major, major issue.
Well, one of the things, Mark, you know, Bernie Sanders, of course, now all these candidates from the likes of Bloomberg and Deval Patrick today, the former Massachusetts governor, where, of course, we broadcast from. And, in the race, these are corporate Democrats. They don't like the idea of Sanders or Warren potentially winning the nomination and becoming the next president and, taking on Wall Street. It was funny that Bezos, after the loss, when he thought was a win, went to Bloomberg and said, you got to get in the race because you got to stop Bernie, you got to stop Warren. And, of course, he couldn't even win in his own city council races. Never mind, advised Bloomberg to get in. This idea of these billionaires, trying to rule the world, it's chaos for everyone who's not a billionaire. And this is what these guys don't seem to do. They have these vanity campaigns. I don't know if Bloomberg is going to get more than 100 votes. I mean, he tries to buy them, of course. But really, who's into Michael Bloomberg? And Bezos is his best buddy. The Swan victory to me is an indication that people want a real fighter, a champion for their views, their issues. And there was a big middle finger to Mr. Bezos. And I think in all the other elections, too. Talk to me about that, because that's, there's a quote that Bernie Sanders laughed, at the idea of Bezos urging Bloomberg to run, billionaires, asking their buddies. Your thoughts, Mark?
I really should have known that something was in the air when I saw two eagles soaring above Lake Union in downtown Seattle on the night of the election. That, to Native Americans, that would have been a sign for sure. I think that the fact that people got out late and voted at the very last minute and kind of crammed the voting receptacles full of all of these late votes is what threw the election in this direction. It's interesting to me that Lewis, who is also a progressive running in this race, he's also, his favorite supporter is former U.S. Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, and because Robert Reich was his professor. So he was very confident the night of the election when I was there. And I did mention on your show, that we don't know what the results are going to be. Everything could change within the next 24 or 48 hours. Nobody knows when the final vote tally will come in, because people were also mailing in their vote as well as dropping them off that day. So the fact that Andrew and his campaign manager, Parker, were very confident and kind of knew that they were going to win, I'm surprised to see that for two, new people on the political scene that were that well informed and that confident at that point, because not everybody else was. But it looks like Amazon is not going to be able to buy the city council. There was actually a backlash, and that was the question on a lot of people's minds is, so that's great, you try to buy the election, but what is the backlash? Will there be a backlash? Because sometimes you push people around like that, and they come back at you with a new democracy movement and say, no, we are going to reelect Shama Sawant, who I also mentioned, is kind of an international figure in a lot of ways. So she has more pull than just, I think, on the Seattle City Council. But she's also, what I tweeted about was, even her critics have to admit that she is an effective leader, and she's also a very effective campaigner. She knows how to win elections. So in general, it's good news for progressive politics in Seattle. Amazon was able to influence the election a bit. With two of the candidates did take that money. My question now is, the two candidates that did take Amazon money that are going to be on the council, what are they going to say when they're called on that? Are they going to distance themselves possibly from Amazon, who has been known in the past, to kind of dump people who support them? I mean, some of the council members that actually voted to rescind the affordable housing tax on large corporations, some of the people that supported Amazon's position on that didn't get Amazon money. They got somebody handpicked by Amazon to run against them. So that's not really necessarily seen as fair play. So who knows? I mean, Amazon in the end doesn't care about Seattle. They're a huge multinational corporation. They'll go wherever they can exploit the most people, property, and economics, It's a very profit-driven bottom line, so I'm not sure they have a long investment in Seattle. They don't own a sports team or a newspaper or anything like that here. They're just doing corporate business.
Yeah.
So
that's the
corporate
interesting
headquarters
thing
here.
I know that Pete Carroll and others have talked about the loss of Paul Allen, of course, the Microsoft co-founder, and owned the Seahawks there for a long time and helped build the stadium, and so on and so forth. I just think that there's a real lesson to be learned by the rest of the country about the comeback by Ms. Sallant and the real grassroots effort to get the people out to vote. And what we just talked about with Melissa Tomlinson before you came on about, the low turnout. And I also think that the young people coming out, we were talking about this. I don't know if this has ever been discussed in Seattle, but, you guys started the revolution on $15 minimum wage just south of you at SeaTac and, in the city itself. And a lot of things have really started, the whole grunge movement, right? But I'm wondering if 16-year-olds voting, has that at all been introduced by Jay Inslee or anybody in the State House down there in Olympia? What has been discussed about, that idea? Because I think as more and more young people get engaged in politics, why not move it from 18 to 16? I think psychologically it's easier to get a kid in high school than it is when he or she is either in college or in between college. There's a little bit, so many things going on as you turn 18. I think that it would be wise if you want to get more voter participation. Is that at all, been an issue?
Yeah, I just stepped into another room here. I have not heard that discussed, which I'm kind of surprised about. I mean, in order to smoke marijuana legally in Washington State, you must be 21. In order to drink alcohol, you must be 21. So this is not a great state for teenagers, when it comes to age limits. But that would be a pro-democracy kind of movement to increase the franchise. So I don't see why the progressives like Jay Inslee, who says, it's time for the old guard to step aside and let the kids run things because they know what's going on. He'd be the kind of person that would probably support something like that. The two issues that a lot of people don't know about with this election are one that, for whatever reason, these media corporations decided to step out during this election. I guess that's why the New York Times and the Washington Post was covering it, because Starbucks stepped into it too and started rattling cages about public safety, and that was their signal. They said without saying that they were going to support Jim Pugel, the former police officer who talks a lot about public safety, of course, against Andrew Lewis, the progressive that I was talking about. And then also the fact that Bill Gates, just recently, has come out and signaled that he might just, vote for Trump if Warren wants to push this billionaire tax because he doesn't like it. So, oh my, these guys are jumping into the electoral scene in a way I haven't seen before. Normally they just give to both sides, to hedge their bets and then shut up. But nope, Gates is out there talking. Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks ran for president. These corporate guys who are billionaires, they don't want to just have huge corporations. Apparently they want to buy candidates and run as candidates as well. So Bloomberg, you could probably throw into that same kettle. And also, one more thing, there are conservatives in Washington State who keep hiring this guy named Tim Eyman to run all sorts of nefarious anti-tax bills to defund the government. And he's often successful, and he was this time around. They write purposely misleading initiatives, because we have an initiative process here where if you get enough signatures, you can run something on the state ballot. And they take advantage of that, and they run anti-tax measures which are bankrupting the state again. And so much for our mass transit and light rail, Jeff, because the state is cutting tons of funding now because Tim Eyman convinced people to vote against their own best interests.
Yeah, that's there's Jim Eyman's in a lot of these different states, of course, and they try to I like the term that Obama used, bamboozle a ton of people, particularly low information voters. Another reason, by the way, to get people starting on voting and the idea of civics being taught in the classroom. We talked about that with Melissa Tomlinson too. These are all things that I think that are critical to our society. Otherwise, you get a lot of people being, hoodwinked into all these different things. I mean, look, Donald Trump is a perfect example of it, about being bamboozled. But, here's something, and this is something that you and I have talked about. In fact, I have been on the Democracy Watch a podcast and so forth, talking about all of these issues. But the corporate media, I mean, if you were to listen to it and watch it as I do, Bernie Sanders doesn't exist. They never talk about him. They'll talk about Warren, but they never talk about Bernie. They talk about Warren these days. Oh, well, she can't handle the Medicare for All issue, yada, yada, yada. She's too liberal, And Bernie, meanwhile, has been surging. He's right in the middle of the polls in Iowa and New Hampshire, the first two races, the first two states. He was doing well in Nevada. He's doing particularly well with young people of color, young people in general. But, if you didn't listen to this show or read some of your work or a few other, online radio and TV shows on YouTube and so forth, then, you're not going to find this stuff out.
Yeah, I should correct myself, too, when I say, that it's conservatives that are paying to my men. I would say business interests, which were a lot of the same people that were fighting the progressives on the city council. So whatever their politics are, whether it's libertarian, conservative, independent, left, right, whatever, they're business interests. So on economic issues, they take on people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, not for because of differences in political philosophy, just purely from economic reasons, because they don't want to pay those taxes, and they don't like the idea of someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren in the White House. So I put up that warning flag months ago after the debates when I said, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, unlike some other folks, have come across as the anti-corporate candidates. They blame everything on big business and corporations. Not everything, but most things. The insurance companies because on the health care issue, defense contractors, the military-industrial complex, and all sorts of things. It's always about the corporations and Amazon monopolies like Google. And so I knew that there would be people like Jeff Bezos getting together with his billionaire friends, trying to raise money to counter them. And they also, as we talked about before, also able to run a lot of advertising on media and just outright own media. Like Bezos owns the Washington Post. So.
Right, exactly. And Bloomberg, of course, owns his own network as well. Mark, unfortunately, we've run out of time. And I will say this, though, that however you can get the good karma that has, encompassed Seattle and terms of the Seahawks and the Sounders and so on, come back, send it east. We could use it over here and throughout the Midwest as well. So send us some good karma, my friend.
Well, I think that as far as the progressive city council, that's a movement you're going to see in a lot of different parts of the country. As younger people gain the voting franchise and get involved in politics and run for office themselves, you'll definitely see that happen.
Well, I think you're right. I think we're seeing it here in Boston. Michelle Wu, city councilor, very young, progressive woman, who's been challenging the elder Charlie Baker on the MBTA issue and other issues. So it's here and it's in a lot of other places, Chicago, New York, AOC. You can't get younger than her, right? Always great catching up, Mark. We got to run. Take care of yourself and, you got a big crowd over there along Pioneer Square. So enjoy and have a brewski for me.
Yeah, Jeff, we'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. That's Mark Taylor-Canfield. I'm Jeff Santos. I want to thank JR for producing this broadcast. Of course, I want to thank Mark Pacheco and Tony Loach for giving me the opportunity to do this show. We're here every Monday through Friday, folks, 3 to 6. My name is Jeff Santos, and right now it's my time to say I gotta go.
AM and now W259DD 99.7 FM WVBF Middleborough, Taunton.
Play radio station Talking Information Center or listen on Google Home or Google Home Mini. Simply say, "Hey Google, play radio station Talking Information Center," or you may listen by downloading our free app on your Apple or Android device. As you'll realize, there are many ways to access programming from the Talking Information Center these days. Choose the one that is right for you. If you would like any of this information repeated, please don't hesitate to call us at 781-834-4400, and we would be glad to assist you. Again, the number is 781-834-4400.
This is the Talking Information Center, a window to independence through local volunteers reading over 300 newspapers, magazines, and books specific to your community.
Now available on your smart speaker by saying, play radio station Talking Information Center.
For comments and more information, call 781-834-4400 or visit ticnetwork.org.
Thank you for listening.
WVBF Middleborough, WRRS Middleborough, WRSLP Pittsfield, WLLO Londonderry, WVAO-LP Athol, WDJF Framingham.
Coming up next from the Talking Information Center, please enjoy selected readings from the Week magazine. And as always, thank you for listening.
This is Mike, and I'm going to be reading you the Week magazine for November 8th, 2019. And as always, we start with the editor's letter. Several years after my family immigrated to the U.S., my father got a peculiar letter from a friend in the Soviet Union. The letter, no doubt the friend had been strong-armed or blackmailed into writing it, asked if he might be able to procure a technical manual for a DEC mini-computer banned from export to the Soviet Union. Obviously, that was the end of that relationship. In the story of my family's immigration, this was a last, raw, tawdry reminder of the repressive, manipulative regime we'd left. Like so many other Soviet Jewish refugees, my family was committed to the United States, fiercely anti-communist and hopeful about regime change that would bring democracy to Russia and its captive nations. In all this, my family's convictions were probably similar to those of another family of Soviet refugees who arrived in the U.S. 3 years after us, that of Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, the decorated officer and National Security Council staffer who testified on Capitol Hill this week. As thanks for his testimony, some on the right have accused Vindman of dual loyalty and even treason. Nobody genuinely believes this. What infuriates his critics is that Vindman, like others in the NSC and State Department, was willing to call out the effort to blackmail Ukraine's new reformist government as a policy inimical to American interest and more characteristic of the repressive state Vindman and I left behind. Still more damning is that for Vindman there really is no quid pro quo. He gets nothing out of standing up with the enmity of the President of the United States. For people who think the world operates entirely on the basis of quid pro quo, that makes no sense. Just as it makes little sense to support allies like Ukraine unless maybe they can help out with a little favor. To understand someone like Vindman, it helps to put yourself in his shoes, a refugee from a failed dictatorship, serving a nation built not on blackmail, but on principle.